Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Tamai, Perek Zayin, Halacha Aleph and Beis. We're going to be learning today Daf Samach Vov. We left off on Daf Samach Vov, Amud Aleph, 2 lines from the top of the Amud by the dot, Rabbi Yaakov bar Zavdi. Just reminding everyone that we had yesterday the Shita, the opinion of Rabbi Zajac that holds that the stipulation, we called in our words of introduction, our stipulation, option Aleph, right? That before Shabbos, you make the stipulation. And that will allow you to do the actual identification on Shabbos proper, right? Thus allowing you to mamish physically separate it and eat the remainder because you were misaking it, so to say, from before Shabbos already. So we learned that a person, Abzeda holds, that a person can make such a stipulation even regarding food that's not his, right? The example people used yesterday is that we do mamish the same Eid of Tafshilin, right? And that explained why Rabbi Oishia was allowed to send Zavdi to go be misakin the produce of that woman. I'm sorry, that's why Rabbi Oishia, right, send Zavdi ben Levi. However, we're going to begin today's share by learning that Rabbi Yaakov bar Zavdi disagrees with that. He actually holds that what Rabbi Hoshaya did was incorrect because a person cannot make a stipulation for anyone other than his own. So Mela, if he would have made a kinyan the way we learned yesterday, and if he would have acquired her food, then Taka, he would be allowed to do it. But that's not what happened. And therefore, there's a machlokes whether his psak was valid or not. Now, that is just going to be the opening of today's share, which will be concluding the story we learned yesterday. But I want to take a little step back over here, and I want to ask, as we call in Yiddish, Klotz Kasha. We learned previously in the Masechta, and not only did we learn it in the Mishnah, there was no machlokes about it, and so Paskins the Rambam, that because of either Kavod Shabbos or Ema Shabbos, or the way we spoke out, it's really both together. And Amoritz is believed on Shabbos to say that my produce is not the my. The whole thing doesn't make sense. The whole Mishnah Aleph L'chayva doesn't make sense. What do you mean? And Amoritz invites a chaver on Shabbos, Simcha. All the chaver needs to do is ask his host, did you separate all of the tithes? I'm bringing this out because there's going to be 2 parts of today's daf that will only be appreciated based on the answer to this question. You know what the answer to this question is? That in many scenarios, a guest will feel very uncomfortable asking his host, do you really keep kosher? Is this really? And therefore,
the host.
Mamish, you're insulting your host. In other words, I want to make that acknowledgement that I know that if the chaver would have the, you can say the word courage, would have the tact, if he would have the type of relationship where there can be a greater level of honesty, which is really the only real relationship, then the whole thing is unneeded, not necessary. But the reality is that most friendships are very superficial and people are unable to be honest with each other. People are constantly afraid, I don't want to insult you, you don't want to insult me. But that leads me into something else. Because now the question will be, Simcha, hold on. If he is not asking the host, and now he's separating the Trumas Ma'aseh, what, you don't think the host is going to see that? And I'll tell you more than that. What do you do with it? Because, in other words, maybe if the host would know what you're doing, then the Trumas Ma'aseh that you separated, he's not going to eat because it's Trumas Ma'aseh. Shaldamai. But if the whole thing is to cover up, not to show the host that you suspect him of being that of an Einon Eman, and you suspect that he didn't take off the Trumas Ma'aseh. You understand? The Ma'aseh Sheni, you're redeeming it on your own money. There's no issue with that. But what do you do with the Trumas Ma'aseh? So we're going to have a little bit of a discussion of how the Chaver is going to have to destroy it, and that's going to lead us into Akasha. What about Baltashkis and other stories that are all going to be surrounded around the premise that I just laid out, that the issue isn't only that the host is an Amoritz, but that the guest, the Chaver, is not telling him what he's doing. He's not asking him directly. He's doing it, so to say, in a hidden in a hidden way. And finally, we're going to have, before the new Mishnah, before Halacha Beis, we're going to have a Braisa that's going to bring Shitas Rebbe Yehuda that argues with our Mishnah, who holds that a person may not make such a Tanai, as it is in the case of the Mishnah, for a product that's not even in his Rishus. He's going to be removing the Trumas Meiser from the product that's not even in his Rishus, right? So yesterday we learned that Amar Rabbi Yechanan, that the heter of our Mishnah, that I can do it even though it's not the Rishusi, is taka only by the might. By Tevel, even though a Tanai works for Tevel, but it only works for Tevel if it's my produce. We're going to learn Rabbi Yehuda holds that just like by Tevel, you cannot do it. You cannot make the separation. If you are separating it from something that did not belong to you from before Shabbos, the same thing is with the Mai. So Rabbi Yehuda is going to offer another solution. And we're going to bring up now something really, really fascinating. It's hard to speak it out, the Kitzur in the Hagdama. But basically, when a person has a suffix, whether what they separated was necessary or not, which means it might be the necessary Trumas Meiser. But if it's not necessary, then what is it? It's Tevel. What do you do with that? So you're going to have to take other Tevel and separate Trumas Meiser for the doubt, but then you kick the can down the road. I'll explain this better when we learn it inside. And what do we do whenever there's a suffix, whether something has to be tied? How do you resolve that suffix? Or indeed, is the suffix unresolvable? You just minimize the quantity of produce, as we'll explain. And then we're going to move Mamish Me'ingen Le'ingen to Halacha Beis, to the new Mishnah, Daf Samach Vav Amid Beis. The Mishnah is going to be speaking about Mamish, the same scenario, but not food. Yes, liquid. What's the difference between food and liquid? I'll tell you very simply. Again, based on our premise, the chaver doesn't want for the owner to know what he's doing. So when it comes to food, I'm able to remove. I'm removing 1 out of 100. Trumas Meiser, Meiser and Meiser is one from. It's a very small amount. I'm removing a small amount, and the owner doesn't know it. And you'll see I'll crumble it up, and there won't be an issue with Baltashkis, and I'll get rid of it, which is what you'll need to do. But by liquid, you can't get rid of some of the liquid without the host noticing. The only time what you would do with the liquid is that you would make the identification of the Trumas Meiser by leaving a little bit in the bottom of the cup. By food, you take it off before you eat, which is ideal. I'm not allowed to eat the produce that's not tied prior to removing Tevel. I cannot remove the Meisres at the end. So that will be the issue with the liquid. Since you have to leave it at the end, what do you do over here? Okay, so we're going to leave that open. That will be more or less today's daf. Let's go.
Sorry, is it liquid olive oil or?
Didn't say any liquid.
Any liquid, okay.
Any oil. Yeah, the olive oil is only for the tip on the head of the waiter cake. But this for any liquid. Okay. Now, Rabbi, you wanted to say something when I get to the daf? Okay. Says the Gemara. So, Nachamal, guys, what was the story? Remember the story. So you have a Rabbi Shia. He used to make the way we explained every week he made a Tanai. Why? Just in case he'll find his own food. And what happened that there was a woman that cooked vegetables. She forgot to be masakin before Shabbos. She asked Rabbi Shia help. He sent, Mistamit was his Talmud, Zavdi ben Levi, and Rabbi Bar Mamel, boy, he wondered, how does it work? And the Gemara answered, I'll tell you how it worked. It worked. First of all, he could have acquired it. Then for sure it would have worked according to everyone. Because don't forget that Zavdi ben Levi used Rabbi Oishia's produce to be masakin the woman's vegetables. And Rabbi Oishia's produce was b'reshus of Rabbi Oishia before Shabbos, which is when he made the Tanai. So that's no problem with that. But he did not acquire her produce. So what do you mean he did not acquire her produce? So we concluded yesterday that Rab Zera holds, doesn't matter that he didn't acquire it, because when Rabbi Oishia made the Tanai, he said that I'm doing it for me and for everyone in the city. He did it for others as well. However, we're going to learn the next couple of lines, the way the Maraf Fulda learns it. Rabbi Yaakov bar Zavdi, don't confuse him with Zavdi ben Levi. Now we're speaking about an Amoira on the level who can argue with Rab Zera that no, you can't do that. Rabbi Yaakov bar Zavdi b'shem Rabba Bo didn't use the words boi, which is the words that were used by Rabbi Abba bar Mamol. And guys, don't forget that in the Yerushalmi, the word boy means an inquiry in the Babli. Many times we had mamash in the brachas, we had it all the way in the beginning. The word boy sometimes can mean he made a statement. It certainly doesn't mean a tiyufta. So Rab Abba Bar Mamo, who opened up the challenge against Rabbi Oishia / Zabdi ben Levi by using the words boy, I'm reading inside the Marafulda. And a Chanami, boy means he had a question that was clarified by Rab Ze'era that there was no problem here. You didn't even need to acquire the woman's vegetables because he made a Tanai on him and on others. However, Rabbi Abba'u, who heard the story of Rabbi Oishia and his solution for the woman's vegetables, used the words itosvas. No, itosvas is a lashon of tiyufta. No, what you did is undoable. Because since, look at the words in the Gemara, since he did not acquire the woman's vegetables like we spoke out yesterday, that would have been okay. You are allowed to make a transaction on Shabbos, L'tzoydech Shabbos, L'tzoydech Mitzvah. So there's no issue with that. The rabbinic normal issue of making any types of transactions, which prohibits even a gift. Here it would have been okay. And if you would have done it, it also would have been okay. Because Rabbi Oishia, who sent Zabdi ben Levi, was not that he should take off the Trumas Umaisris from her vegetables. That would not be okay because those her vegetables were not on his reshus when he made the Tanai. But he removed it from his Rebbe's, from Rabbi Shaya's food. That was b'reshusay. If he would have then owned her vegetables, it would have been okay. But since he didn't do it, since Loizaki Zabdi ben Levi Rabbi Shaya b'Yarko, so what are you saying, Rab Zeda? Rabbi Oishia made a stipulation, Olav va'alachedim. Rabbi Bo, and so we'll agree, Rabbi Yaakov Bar Zavdi holds you can't make it tonight, Olav va'alachedim. It's not like Eid of Tavshilin. Don't forget, this whole tonight is like a stretch. Because Tikkun Mana, you're not allowed to take off tithes. You're telling me, you did it before Shabbos and you're only identifying it on Shabbos. That's a huge leniency, this pre-Shabbos stipulation. And it only works for you. You can't make it for other people. So that's a very important machlokes. Again, that closes this sugya. And because of the question that we asked, Ema Shabbos, Kavod Shabbos, you'll see the Gemara is going to give more qualifications, more limitations as to exactly how does the Tanai and when will this Tanai work and when will it not. Okay, says the Gemara.
Rabbi, just a side question.
Yep.
If you held it did work, would you not hold that Rabbi Shaya had to possess those same vegetables that she was tithing? Doesn't it have to be min b'minoi or whatever? Or you could have like a total different, I don't know, he's got wheat and that's what he's separating on her.
Okay, that is making a good point. It has to be the same min and it has to be on the same level of obligation. And I want to just throw out there, Danny, that Yeraka is l'kula, according to all of the Rishonim, right, only has to be tithed midrabanan. So yeah, we have to, for sure, we're speaking about the item that Rabbi Shaya used, had to be something, yeah, it was vegetables, simple, yes, good point. Okay. Kenira Rabbi Shaya had, it was a wealthy yid, and he had all the types of foods in his house, it would have worked. Problem is, could it work? Because it wasn't, okay. Amar Rabbi Yanai. Another qualification to this leniency, that when a person made that pre-Shabbos stipulation, he has to remember his Tanai. In other words, what does the word remembering mean? This is consistent, not only over here, not in your mind. Bepeh, we'll see that in the next line, that he has to verbalize the Tanai that he made before Shabbos. Look inside the Marafulda, around 10 lines from the top. He has to remember Hatanai. What does it mean he has to remember it? That the imnishkach v'loy hiskiroi b'peh, it will be a problem. Okay. In other words, you can ask, of course he remembers it. If from a yid, if he won't remember that he made a Tanai, he won't do it. You're not allowed to do it. No. Remember, it means you have to speak it. And that's why Shimon Barva, which is really Shimon Bar Abba, just in the way it works. Because they used to take out the olives, so it became Ba, Va. Okay. Shimon Bar Va, b'shem Rabbi Yechanan, explains that what does Rabbi Yanai mean? You have to remember it. Of course, you have to remember it. If I know my items are not tight, then I don't remember that I made a pre-Shabbos stipulation. Of course, I won't do it. Remembering means it's a hemshech. V'tzarech. Now I know there's two girsois. We're going to go with the girsa lahachlishoy bisfasov. Remembering means that you have to repeat the Tanai bisfasov. Bisfasov can mean in an undertone. Again, you don't want the host to know what you're doing as we speak, as we said, and you'll see in a moment. In other words, he's going to say that I am now relying on yesterday's stipulation, and he repeats the stipulation. What did he say yesterday? What were the words in the Mishnah? Masha ani asad lahafrish. These are the words. Masha ani is meiser. You have to read the words in the halacha aleph. You'll see. He repeats bisfasov in an undertone that which he said. You have to repeat it. So asks the Gemara. Repeating it makes it worse. Repeating it makes it almost sound as if you're making the designation out. Saying, don't forget, guys, right? We're already so deep into this topic. The ikar is the designation. The ikar mitzvah is the designation. The ikar mitzvah is not the actual separation. Separation is a technicality, the actual separation. Once you made the designation, as long as you did it properly, the remaining is already mesuken. So re-verbalize, and that's done the peh. So what you're telling me that saying that is virtuous, saying it makes it worse. It looks exactly like a new designation. Because that's how you are mafresh trumas u'maisros, by verbalizing the separation. And indeed, now, we're going to learn the marafulda minakotza elakotza amalei. Either atchitano, either you're right. Rabbi Yerushalmi is pointing out, come on, you got to re-stipulate it. That's going to be at least a mara sign. It mamish looks like a new designation, and therefore we don't agree with the fact that tzarich lo heitzib esvasav or tzarich laskiroi, or not. Let's read inside the marafulda. Two different ways of understanding what Rab Zeta said, which will be very important. Either atchi tanoi means asmiyeh, erase it. It should not be mentioned. Mentioning it is worse. That not metaches from the words doicha. You're right. You were doicha. You got a good point. But adahani garsinon mitahei koloimer hoyil vehisne me'erev Shabbos. I disagree with your problem. Ad the honey, the try was already made before Shabbos. Since it was made before Shabbos, I want to say something just to say that normally marasayin means for others. I'm not going to use the word marasayin because, as we'll see in a few lines, the whole story here is that the chaver, the guest, doesn't want anyone to know what he's doing. The whole point, he's going to do something that no one will know. The kasha is more for himself. Saying the words Masha ani mafresh or Masha ani asad lahafresh, which are the words on this pedic, Meiser, and the whole thing, the whole Megillah that you read out over there, like it looks for him, that was the kasha, that he's doing it again. It looks like he's being mafresh, and the Gemara answers according to this Gershon, no, it doesn't look like it. He should verbalize that I said yesterday. That's why I think he should remind himself, the pair, that what I'm doing right now was based on what I said yesterday, and he repeats what he said yesterday.
He either remembers or he doesn't remember. What's the point?
It's not about remembering in your mind. It's about, do you need to verbalize something? Because Kevan, let me say a better point. I know that we didn't learn about it yet. I don't know whether we'll have this soon, right? You make a bracha when you mafresh trumas u'maisros. You do. Okay, when do you make the bracha?
When you're doing it.
You don't make the bracha on Friday. You make the bracha when you're doing it.
When you're doing it.
Yeah. So it's not so much about remembering, Kevin. I'm telling you because the way when in English the word remembering, if I'm suspicious that my host was not mafresh, and I am not going to insult him because I have a very shallow relationship. Everything is insulting, and therefore, if I don't remember that I made a pre-Shabbos tonight, I won't do it. Of course, we're speaking about someone that remembers. It means that you have to re-verbalize. You're making the bracha during the week. You never just make a bracha. You have to first say what you're doing. You make a designation, and then you make a bracha. Okay. Says the Gemara. Rabbi Yirmiyah boi kumi Rab Ze'er. This chaver doesn't want to insult the host. So what will he do? How much is he actually separating simcha? Trumas meiser is 1/100. It's called 1%. Okay. If the host would know that this is trumas meiser, then he'll make sure he gives it to a kohen. By the way, there's other issues that we'll be learning tomorrow. I think in next stuff, the host is not neman, he's not tahar, it's tamei. We'll get to that. But one thing is for sure: if the host knows that the guest, the nutnik, the religious guest, separated trumas meiser, the host is not going to eat it because it belongs to a kohen. But if the host would know what I'm doing, I would ask him, and I would be allowed to believe him. So he doesn't know what I'm doing. So what do I do with my hafrasha? I have to destroy it. Asks the Gemara, how can I destroy it? That's called, guys, baltashkis. What do you do with that food? Can you destroy food? How great is that? So Rab Zera. So Amalei, Rab Zera tells Rabbi Yirmiyah, listen something. Baltashkis means you're not allowed to destroy food that is in the size of a kezayis or more. What he'll do over here is that he'll crumble. Crumble doesn't have to mean what you think it means. It means he'll make it into pieces that are smaller than a kezayis. First, he'll do that. And now he's taking a lot to get rid of it. And he'll get rid of it in a clandestine way. Amalei mefarer kol shuhu. How great is that? Says the let's go with that Pnei Moshe, right? The first line.
Question: is he allocate it as truma meiser before he crumbles it, or he crumbles it and then allocates it?
I don't think it makes a difference.
Well, so if you have food that's already the size of a kezayis, and now it's truma, and now you start cutting up into smaller pieces. How is that? How did you now avoid baltashkas by just chopping it up? Like, okay, so now it's no longer, but it was before.
Doesn't matter. That's the whole point. I thought you're going, Danny, by asking that how can I destroy trumas meiser? Forget about baltashkas. It's we're going to have that tomorrow. I'm not certain. I gave a quick glimpse, and I saw the Gemara begins on the beginning of Samach Zayin. What about Dinei Tumantara? I think that will be part of what we have to address.
All right, can you say, in order for you not to embarrass him, you can destroy? I'm not saying insult, embarrass. It's not a shallow.
If not to embarrass someone, I can burn my whole body up. Right? That's what we say. A person should put himself on a furnace and not shame his fellow. So, yeah, in other words, we're finding a way, Danny, that probably is part of it. We're finding a way to minimize the issue. All of this is not to a shaman. Maybe that's needed.
Right.
Okay, let's look inside the Pnei Moshe. Let's get a couple of more oisius over here. Guys, this is the first medium line, the first line under the Gemara. He's a chaver. He's not a kohen. So the Gemara answers mefarero kol shuhu v'oichel. The shashu oichel, while he's eating his food, he's doing it in a hidden way. Mefareha lahatrumas ma'asim ma'at ma'at. I understand he takes off the 1%. And let's say the 1% is bigger, it's a big, whatever it is. But as he's eating, he's playing around with that. And now with Hirudim, Kol, She'em, Kezayis, Leis V'Mishum Yibadei. Next kasha. Ask
so if I'm at a wedding and they serve me a piece of chicken and I don't want to eat it, but I know it's going to go to the trash. So it sounds like from this Gemara, you should cut it up into smaller pieces, less than a kezayis, then leave it on the plate, and then you don't have to worry about the baltashkas.
I'll give you a better mashal. If you are the waiter cleaning up the food, throwing it in the garbage, that's what you should do. Yes. You're the guest, you're not chayiv to do it. Here, I'm chayiv to do it because I'm not spilling the secret that this is trumas meiser. But one second. The next problem is, I'm a gazlan. Look inside the Pnei Moshe. The host invited the guest to eat. What is he doing? He's taking some of the food and he's crumbing it up. How is he allowed to do it? Answers the Gemara. The answers that that's a cloud that maybe people argue. Ultimately, we all agree to it, that a host wants his guest to have satisfaction. In other words, if the host would have known that the only way the guest can eat halachically is by him taking some of the food and destroying it, he's fine with that. There's no gazela issue. A host wants for his guest to feel comfortable and do whatever he needs to do.
Right. They don't want you to finish the entire plate. You're not forced to eat everything. I'm not saying you're not forced to finish everything in front of you.
That's not true, Kevin. In other words, when I'm a chaver, since in this circumstance, the only way I will be allowed to eat anything is by me removing the trumas meiser, and then technically I have to now make it into smaller pieces, etc. Even though he doesn't know what I'm doing, but there's a general, don't forget, Kevin, there's a limit to that. I mean, how much am I destroying? I'm destroying 1%, just to make it for the record. How far will we extend roitzu shia by nachas ruach? I think if the guest becomes very, is doing a lot of churban in the house, at some point the host doesn't want him to be there.
Oh, you're given a piece of chicken. You don't have to finish the whole thing.
That's the whole point. That's also the point to Danny. So here, I'm not leaving over. I'm getting rid of the in the beginning. Yeah.
The concept of leaving the Thomas and Marxist for the end, especially in this situation.
Can't do that. That will be the problem in the next Mishnah, because if I leave it for the end, then before I left it, I'm eating tevel or demai. That's in the next Mishnah, but that's going to be an issue of Beredo, and we're trying to avoid all of that. We'll get to that soon. Now this concept that the Gemara is suggesting that perhaps, at least in the Havamid, that's not everyone who agrees to that. We'll undo this in a minute. We're doing and we're undoing. Says the Gemara, I know from the other Chachamim, we will see so it's Rabbi and Rabbi Huda. They don't hold of this principle. Not every host wants for his guest to have nachas ruach. Maybe the host wants for his guest to have a lot of pain and suffering. I don't know. So machlokes. That Rabbi Huda, they were once they were guests at a certain balabas. And Oza Lishna Bisha Amar, a slanderer, told the host, these two chachamim, they suspect you. Look at what they're doing. You will see that they're going to start getting rid of some of the food. And they don't even have the courage to tell you that they suspect you. Have daitoch, the idlon machsheduch. Take a look, pay attention, and you will see that they suspect. In other words, right away, this Baal Lashon Hara created a bad feeling between the host and the guests. And Itaki wanted to see what they're doing. So what did he say? Yav le ma'ayin eloin. He was looking at them, and to see if they're going to remove Trumas Meiser, and then they're going to crumble it up. What did they do? So they realized that they're being observed by the host. So now what do you do? So they found a solution. What was their solution? The solution was, there were two guys, these are two guests, Rabbi, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, and Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda. So what happened was, they were sitting, across the table or near each other. So one guy took off a piece of his food and he threw it to share it with his friend. They began to throw food one to the other to share. And during the process, when you start throwing food, like let's bread, some crumbs come off the derech mamela. Okay, that's a gavaldic story. So what happens? Of the nafshin means they were making believe. No, they were doing it, but they were doing it for another reason. Of the nafshin mazrikin ilain leilain, they were throwing food one to the other, and as they're doing it, a few crumbs fall off, and through that, in. So the Gemara says, that proves that we don't say roitzahu shelenachas ruach. Because why would he even care? That's the case. So Zaraya, the Gemara says, no, that's not a raya. No. The Rabbi and Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda, everyone agrees that when a host invites guests, he wants them to have a nachas ruach. But The moment you tell the host they don't trust you, that's different. Then he's going to be insulted. And says the Gemara, really, even Rabbi and Rabbi Yisrael would agree, right? So, a host doesn't want for people to be choshev, and especially these choshev guests. It's very insulting. So he wanted to see where does he stand. That's different. But coming back to our case, the host doesn't know anything. The host invites the guest, and the host is mine. My house is kosher. The guest thinks this guy is an Amma Aretz. He doesn't know the meat is not kosher. There's meat and milk. There's basar shel Solomon ayin. There's bishul akum. There's shiksa. All problems. So you have a problem, but you don't want to tell the host you have a problem. So you have a bigger problem. So you can rely on that. Okay, says the Gemara, and as we said in the introduction, now we're going to quote a brayso that argues with the whole Tanai of the Mishnah. In the case of the Mishnah, case of the Mishnah is that a person is making a stipulation regarding food that's not his, that's not in his reshus. And the Chanami we learned until now, it's only good by Demai. We'll see that Tana Rabbi Yehuda holds, even by Demai, it's not good. Tanai works only for something that is already in your possession. Tani we learned in the brayso that Rabbi Yehuda oiseh. And why? My Tama de Rabbi Yehuda, because how can it work? Okay, so now what? So according to Rabbi Yehuda, same problem. Problem is the same. I am schmecking that the host of Alabas, a good friend of mine, is going to invite me tomorrow. Problem is, in my own heart, I don't trust him to be a full Neman. So what should I do if I can't make the pre tonight? So he has another solution, and this is brilliant. Rabbi Yehuda, that if I, the chaver, think that I'm going to get invited by Reuven, and I know Reuven buys his produce from Livonia market, so I should go to the same market where my balabas, where my host is going to invite me, and I should also buy produce from there. I'll explain in a moment why I need to do that. And now, Uma Asron. Okay. So let's go like this. Even though I'm not allowed to stipulate about produce that's not in my possession, guys, listen to these words. That's Shitas Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda holds that I am able to exempt produce that's not in my possession. I can exempt it. Now, the Gemara is going to right away challenge this whole topic. What, you think I'm allowed to be, I can exempt your produce? I'm creating chaos. If I'll do it, you might do it. I'm not allowed to take away your mitzvah. I'm going to speak about every point in a moment. But let's go first. Rabbi Yehuda holds that a person is allowed to exempt the produce of his fellow before Shabbos. But there's another issue. The other issue is that, if you remember, we learned before in the Mishnah that I am not allowed to separate the Mai separations from one pile of the Mai for another pile of the Mai. Because the whole Demai is a suffix. And it could be that one was already Mesukin. You only have to do it midrabanan. You don't know. And one was not Mesukin, so it's Tebel Doirais. So I'm going to end up being Mesakin min Aptur al-Achir v'chil al-Aptur. So all I need to resolve is I have to make sure that since Rabbi Yehuda holds in this circumstance, I'm allowed to exempt the produce of my fellow. I have to be tapping into the my source. And for that, I have to go to the same market he went to and buy it over there. As we learned in Daf Mem Chesam days, that's where we had this also, that I cannot separate if there's the Demai of one Amoritz and the Demai from another Amoritz. I cannot be mafresh on one for the other. So it has to be from the same source. And as long as I resolve that, I'm good. That will be a solution. And that's the only way you can get invited, which is really difficult because I have to find out who his vendor was, and I have to mamish buy food there, and I have to be masakin for the balabas's food. Now, the problem is, who gives me the right to be mafresh for you? For that, the Gemara, now, guys, the whole din of shlichus, one of the main sources of shlichus is going to be kein torimu gamatem, but I have to be sent. I have to be sent from the mishaleach. I cannot on my own go ahead. You have no knowledge and no consent. How am I allowed to do that? Now, I get it. Normally, it's much worse, because normally, if I'm going to do it, that means your produce is already mesukin. Then when you're going to make the tikkun, The whole thing is wrong. You're doing something that's not necessary. Or you did it before me. What I did, I'm creating chaos. That kasha you don't have over here because the balabas will not do it.
Are you
That's the whole
exempting?
issue. Huh?
Are you exempting all his stuff or what he's feeding you?
Depends how much Avos Yisrael you have. I'm chayiv to exempt that which I'll be eating because I can't eat the mine. But Rabbi Huda is saying that I'm allowed to exempt other people's produce. It means if I know, in my estimation, that the balabas won't be doing anything, he bought the food and he's good to go. Don't forget the storekeeper, the Amma Aretz, said he did everything. So the Amma Aretz who bought it is not going to do anything. I'm going ahead, I'm buying from the same store, and I'm exempting my future host's produce. How am I allowed to do that? And the Gemara is going to show you that there are exceptional cases that you are allowed to do it. Generally, I'm not allowed to exempt another person's produce without their knowledge and consent. But b'makom she'ein bereira, not bereira, halachic bereira. When there's no option, you got to do it. Rabbi Rabbi Yechanan gives an example, compares this. Asu oisai, kemoichid peiris tefillin lechaveiroi. What happens, guys? Let's use name Simcha. Reuven has produce, and he sold it to Shimon, and then he chaps. I sold him Tevin. Now, don't forget that even by Amaratzim, even by Einam Nemanim, Shimon, the biggest chashash is it's the Mai. Shimon will never separate Truma Gedoyla because no one can sell food that wasn't even taken off Truma Gedoyla. No one did that. What happens if someone did that? I know I sold you by mistake. I thought I took off Truma Somaisis, and what I sold you was complete devil. What am I going to do? So first of all, I should go run after you. Let me go find you. Number one, your first responsibility of the seller is go try to find the buyer and rectify it by separating from it the Trumas Somaisis. And if the guy is going to complain, but I overpaid you, you have to then correct the money because, right, he's losing 22%. But what happens if the seller cannot find a buyer? So let's go. If he knows that what he sold is still be'en, still in the world, was not consumed yet, then he has to be ma'aser aleim. Here you see clearly. How do you ma'aser aleim, guys? How do you do that? The seller takes his own tevel and he separates not only for it, but also for that which he sold. In other words, you see that when there is no other way to rectify an error, a person is obligated to exempt the payers that he sold it, and that will be the answer. So same thing over here. Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with our Tana. Rabbi Yehuda holds that, and again, this is all predicated that it's so important for camaraderie, for people to be able to eat in other people's homes. So he says that's the solution. Exempt it before Shabbos. The Mai one on the other, go to the same source. Okay. Now let's go on to this Braisa that Rabbi Yechanan is quoting, which is going to get fascinating. Now the Imlav, if you know that Shimon already ate it, there's nothing I can do. In other words, once a person ate produce, ate tevel, making a separation now for it doesn't resolve the issur and the issue. So then question now will be Safek Kayamin. Safek ain't Kayamin. What do you do over here? You have a Safek. What do you think you do, Simcha? Separate me Safek. Let me tell you the problem with separating me Safek. How come? So let's say I'm the seller. I sold you produce and I made a mistake. So therefore, let's say I have to separate. Let's go just to Truma Gedoyla. The same thing will go to everything else. I have to separate 2% of that. I don't know whether maybe you ate it already. If you ate it already, now I separate the 2% from tevel. When I separate 2% from tevel as Truma Gedoyla, what I separated is not tevel. What I separated is Truma Gedoyla. But if you already ate it, so my separation for that is ineffective. So what I separated is tevel. But we don't know. It might be tevel, it might be truma, which would mean not a kohen can eat it, not a Yisrael can eat it. What do you do with that? So what you do with that is you take other tevel and you separate that for this by saying that if this is truma, it's not needed. But if this is tevel, so from each 2% of it has to be truma gedola. So you separate further. What am I accomplishing with it? I'm not kicking the can down the road for no reason. I'm accomplishing something. Every time I do that, the amount of food that's a suffix is much less. It's only 2% of the 2%. Or even in Meisid, it's only 10% of 10%. It's much less. In other words, you're going to end up at a point, you will have a suffix. But instead of only doing it once and having the suffix in a larger amount, do it one more time. So like this, you minimize the suffix. Let's read it inside. Great, huh? Ma'aser aleim. We're learning new things. I don't remember this in the Rambam. Ma'aser aleim. V'koyre shem l'masrei seyem. V'koyre shem l'masrei seyem. There are different ways of learning it, and we explained it the way you know. Some of the noisy came. Let me explain it over here. Okay. Bottom line is, coming back over here, that you see from the general, not from the suffix case, which is fascinating, but you see that even though, yes, you're right, a person is not allowed to be toidim uma'asit for produce that's not his. I cannot exempt yours. I'm not doing you a favor. If you don't have knowledge and consent, I'm not allowed to do it. There are times that you do it, and that will be an exceptional time. And that will be the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda. And we have another couple of minutes, and I really want to begin at least the halacha base. Halacha base is the same. Okay, you have a host. Right, I suspect I think the guy might invite me tomorrow, but he's going to give me wine, liquids now, and maybe the wine, and I don't have the courage, or I don't want, for whatever reason, to rock the boat. I'm not going to ask him. So just to say the same thing, you can't, because since I don't want my host to see what I'm doing, that's the basis of this. So I can't remove it. By food, you can take off a piece. By liquid, where are you going to spill it on the ground? Even though stam lo'ir, that when we drink liquids, there's an inyan of removing a little bit of the cup. So many, by the way, if someone is familiar with that practice, then Yutaka could remove it in the beginning. But we're speaking about people that never saw that. They don't know what you're doing. Because the person that does it was educated like me to do it in a way that's very tzunua. No one even knows that you're doing what you're doing. So here you'll have to leave the liquid in the end of the cup. But that will be a problem, because if I'm only leaving it at the end, when I drank the cup, it was the mine. Let's read it inside. In the case where the host is pouring a cup to the guest, Omer, now Omer is not on Shabbos. Omer means, then the pre-Shabbos stipulation will be very similar to what we had in Halacha Aleph. That Masha Ani Asid L'Shayir V'Shuli HaKois. That's the difference. That which I will leave in the bottom. Hareyo Maisid. Maisid means it's going to be, don't forget, guys, to get to Tumas Maisid, you have to first separate Maisid Ishon. Maisid Ishon is really 10%, but you want to separate the 1% from the 10%. So the drop that I'm going to end up leaving, that is initially Maisid Ishon, Usha'ar Maisid Samachloi, together with the other 9% near the drop, those 9%, I'm going to end up drinking. But that is the first, that's Maisid Ishon. And then that first drop that I spoke about, Zeshro, Sisi Maisid, will now become the Trumas Maiser Olav on the 10%. That will be the 10% of the 10%. And I make another pre-Shabbos declaration, the designation. Umaiser Sheni, if you remember, about Maiser Sheni, even when we learned in the Perek Hey about making a mark on the food, you only have to make a mark for Truma Gedoylo when needed and for Trumas Maiser. When it comes to Meiser Sheni, since you're going to be mechalel on ma'ois, all you need to do is to say generally where will it be in the pile. In the north side of the pile, on the right, to the left, here in the cup, we're going in the top and the bottom. So I mentioned Meiser Rishon in the bottom to make sure the Meiser Sheni is not farmished with it, and the Meiser Sheni will be on the top. The Meiser Sheni, Befiv means will be on top of the cup, and that, which the 10% that I'm getting, the cup that I'm getting tomorrow, that he will pour me, and the 10% that I will leave tomorrow on the top, I want you to know that I'm being mechal and amois. Okay. So now, says the Gemara, first of all, the words of the Mishnah, Mizogi loy hakois, doesn't mean that if it happened and you never knew about it, if you never knew about it, then there's nothing you can do. Kene masnisa, what the Mishnah really means to say is, that le'inyan bezigas hakois, which means that if I suspect that he will be giving me a cup, then before Shabbos, it's bitnayas maybe before Shabbos. The problem is manan kaimen. What are we talking about? It's like the Gemara im ba'oimed mikvar. If the designation happens before if you make the designation before you begin drinking, you only leave it in the bottom, but you make the designation before you have a cup of liquid. There is in the bottom, there's a drop of Trumas Meiser. If you're making the actual identification before you're drinking, it's in the cup. Now, how much bittul do you need for Truma? Ratio of 1 in 100. Here you don't have, here I have 1 in 99 because it's 100%. It's not bottle. So how can you even drink it? Mashka mu'urafu. And so if you only make this designation, you only make this identification after you drink it, so before you drink it, what happens? You're drinking tevel. So you're going to tell me, problem. It's going to come out if you only make it at the end. Prior to the end, it wasn't separated yet. So the solution must be Ella ki nan kaimen. How will it work? But I made mikvar lichisha eshtem. He says that the designation shall take effect now and when I'll drink it. In other words, I'm designating it now and I'm identifying it at the end. And I want you to know that this only works because we have Bereda. Only works if it has Bereda. I know it's late. The last marafulda. The nimso she'enu she'eshet tvalim, 4 lines before the bottom of the Amid. Hoyel v'amad nami mikvar. He's saying I'm doing it right away. If it's right away, then it's mixed in. Because he only says right away and at the end. I am designating it now. But where is it? I'm not telling you now. I'm only going to tell you later. I'm gonna identify it later. Now again, this only works if you have B'nai, which is what we tried to avoid in the whole so far halacha aleph. Because if you go to B'nai, then you can make the separation after Shabbos as well, as we'll continue, God willing, tomorrow.
Thank you very much.